Welcome! In the last lecture, we added in a sky sphere to our dynamic sky actor, and we also created a simple sky material. Going from here, in order to achieve what we want, we'll start to do a lot of material work. Before we do that, I'd like to review some important concepts, and I'm going to do that inside of our example map. So go to Maps, and go inside of Test Maps. I'm going to double click to open this examples map. First thing, I'm going to duplicate this floor and this text render actor. So select both of them, then hold down Alt on my keyboard and drag them out. And for the second one, I'm going to change its name from construction script to material refresher. Then I'm going to go back to my examples folder and right mouse button click to create a new folder and name this one the same thing, material refresher. And double click to open it. Right mouse button click to create a material. I'm going to call it am_refresher. So this is my current setup. If you'd like to catch up with me, you can pause the video now and give this a go. Welcome back. Now I'm going to double click to open this material. The first important concept about a material that I'm going to review is data type. Now you already know that inside of the material graph, the coding language that we are using is something called HLSL. The most basic data types in this language are called float, float2, and float3. In Unreal's material graph, this is what they look like. So this is for float, this is for float2, and this is for float3. And they have many different names. For example, in the graph, the first one is called a constant, the second one is called a constant2 vector, and the third one is called constant3 vector. It doesn't matter how they are called. The only thing that we need to understand is how many values they have and which value we want. And that brings us the concept of RGB or XYZ. These two terms are used interchangeably since everything is about values, and sometimes values may mean color, sometimes value may mean vector. And we use all sorts of math operations to get the desired result we want. Here I'm going to show you three values. So this is the first one. It has a value of 1 for the X or for the R, and it has values of 0 for the other two components. And these are my other two values. When writing code, the most commonly used debug approach is we print the values that we want to observe through text onto the screen. And based on the result we get, we'll know what's wrong in our code. But that's not really how things work in material, because in material all we see is color. If the first value is the value that I want to debug, and say if I plug this value into my base color socket, this is the thing that I'll see. And same thing goes for the other two values. The most tricky part for working inside of the material graph, I'd say, is how to draw the connection between the color and the value, and how to see the values behind the colors. And as a mini challenge to you, in the example material that you just created, see if you can create these four colors inside of your material. From left to right, there are black, red, yellow, and white. This shouldn't be too hard for you to do. Pause the video now and give this a go. Welcome back. Now I'm going to bring out these four colors inside of my example material. Back to my project. For black color, we can just hold down 1 on our keyboard and left mouse button click and plug in this value 0 to the base color. I'm going to change the preview mesh from sphere to a plane. So this is what we get. So plugging a value of 0 into base color is the equivalent of plugging in 3 zeros into base color. I'm going to hold down 3 on my keyboard to bring out a float3 and plug this into base color. You can see we get the same result. And that's because the socket base color is looking for 3 values, it's looking for a float3, and if we just plug in a float1, Unreal will automatically fill in the other two values for us. And that's another important thing to know when working inside of the material graph. You should always know how many values the socket you're plugging into is looking for. Alright, this is the black color, and to get a red color, I'm going to hold down 3 again. And this time, I'm going to change the value for the X to be 1. You can see in here, they are called XYZ, and in the details panel here, they are called RGB. Like I mentioned earlier, these two terms are used interchangeably. Sometimes they might mean color, sometimes they might mean a vector or a direction. Alright, I'm going to plug this into base color, and this is our red color. And to get a yellow color, I'm going to hold down 3 again, and this time I'm going to give it a value of 1 for the X a value of 1 for the Y. And now we have yellow. I'm going to plug this into base color. The last color is white. To create it, there are two ways. First, we can hold down 1 on our keyboard to bring out a value of 1. Change this value to be 1 and plug this into base color socket. So this is the equivalent of plugging into 3 ones. So change their values into 3 ones and plug this into base color. And we get the exact same result. So this is the idea of data type. And this is something that we're going to use over and over again later. Alright, the next important concept that I'm going to cover is the node texture coordinate. So to bring it out, there are two ways. The first way, I'm going to right mouse button click and type in the node texture coordinate. And the second way, we can hold down U on our keyboard and left mouse button click. And I'm going to plug this pin into base color. And you can see this is the result we get. Now you're probably wondering, why is this important and how should I understand this? Pretty much everything we do later is from the concept of texture coordinate. I mentioned earlier that everything inside of material is displayed as color. What we should really do here is try to see the values behind the colors, and that's how we can understand the output result of this node. I got some questions for you as hints. The first one, what's the data type this node is currently outputting? So we have float 1, float 2, and float 3. I'm gonna tell you the answer now. So this is a float 2. That means it has 2 values. And the next 2 questions, can you see where is 0, where is 1? Based on that mini challenge that we just did, a value of 0 will be displayed as black. We can see the black color on the top left corner. So that's where the 0 is. And since this is also a float 2, the value on the top left is 0, 0. As for a value of 1, you can see this corner here is being displayed as red. So that means it has a value of 1 for the X component and a value of 0 for the second one. And same thing goes for this corner. It's being displayed as green. That means it has a value of 1 for the second component and a value of 0 for the first one. And this one here is being displayed as yellow. This is kind of the spot where these 2 colors meet each other. So in here we have values of 2 ones, 1 for the X, 1 for the Y. And that's the idea of texture coordinate. What we are seeing here is basically 2 axes. So something like this, the origin point is at here, and this is our horizontal axis, this is our vertical axis. The name that we give to this horizontal one is called U, and this vertical one is called V. And based on this coordinate, this is how we can apply our texture correctly onto our model. Back to my project, I'm going to first bring out a texture sample node. So there are 2 ways to do that. First way, right mouse button click and type in texture sample. Or the second way, we can hold down T on our keyboard and left mouse button click. And we need to specify which texture we want to sample in here. So I'm going to click this drop down. The texture that I'm going to search for here is called UV4_logo. If you are not seeing this later, make sure you have show engine content and show plugin content enabled. I'm going to select this texture, and you can see it has a UV socket. So always know how many values a socket is looking for. So UV is looking for a float 2, and we can plug this into UV and plug this into base color. So this is how we can display the texture using the texture coordinate. And I got a challenge for you. Now say if I want to change the values for my coordinate. So for the first one, the origin point is still at here. But for the horizontal axis, instead of 1 and 0, now I'm going to change it to 2 and 0. For the vertical axis, instead of a value of 0 and 1, I want to change it to 0 and 2. For this corner here, I want to change it to 2 and 2. What if now, instead of 0, 0 and here, I like to change it to 0.5 and 0.5. Change this value here to 1.5, 0.5. And change this one to 0.5, 1.5. And change the value at the corner here to be both 1.5. What are the math operations that I need to perform on my texture coordinate node? Changing value this way, what impact does it have for displaying our texture? Pause the video now and figure this out, or come back if you need help. Welcome back. Hopefully that wasn't too hard for you to do. And don't worry if you ran into any issues, let's look at how it can be done. First, let's look at how we can achieve the first image. So basically what we need here is we need to use a multiply node. So we can hold down M on our keyboard and left mouse button click to bring it out. And connect this one to here. And for this value, I'm going to change it to 2. And that's how we can change the values on the 2 axis. Now if I plug this into the UV socket, notice how we are displaying the texture now. So from the value of 0 to 1, we get one pattern. From 1 to 2, we get another pattern. And same thing goes for this vertical axis. And this is how we can change the tiling of our texture. Since we still have the same space and we need to fit in more patterns, the pattern itself becomes smaller. And if we want it to become larger, we can use a divide node in here. And if I plug this into the UV socket, now the values for this corner would be 0, and the values for here would be 0.5. So it's only enough for us to display half of the texture. And as for the second image, we just need to use an add node. So I'm going to bring out an add node and change this value here to 0.5. And notice how the texture is being displayed now. By adding the values to this texture coordinate, we are shifting the space that we are using to display our texture. And if I change this value to something like 0.8, you can see it feels like we are panning the texture. And if I change it to 0.9, this is what we get. We can pan this texture on both directions. And maybe this is not what you want. Instead of adding values to both axes, you only want to add values to one axis. To do that, we'll need to use a node called component mask. So there are 2 ways to bring it out. First one, right mouse button click and type in mask. And select this component mask. I'm going to move these nodes to the right a bit. And now if I plug this texture coordinate into this mask, we can decide here which value we want. So I want the first value. So I only want to take the R channel. You can call this X if you want. And if I'm only adding 0.9 to the X, you can see this is what we get. Something seems to be broken. And that's because the UV socket is looking for 2 values. We are only giving it 1. So we'll need to fill in the second value. To do that, we'll need another component mask. So the second way to bring out a component mask is we can press Shift plus C on our keyboard. So for this one, I want to mask out the second value, so the G channel, and plug this into here. Then I'll need to combine these 2 values together. So I'm going to use an append node and select this append vector. So plug this value to socket B. And now here we have a float 2. And plug this into UV. Now by changing this value here, we'll be only offsetting the image on the horizontal axis and not the vertical one. And these nodes here are the idea of UV tiling and UV offset. Final step, I'm going to create a simple material. So I'm going to hold down S on my keyboard and left mouse button click to bring out a scalar parameter. I'm going to call this one tiling and give it a default value of 1. Plug this into the B socket and hold down S again, bring out another parameter. I'm going to call this one offset. A default value of 0 is fine here. And I'm going to drag out another pin, use an add node, and connect this to B socket. And I'm going to plug the final result into UV. Alright, I'm going to click apply. Back to my level, I'm going to create a material instance from this material. So I'm going to right mouse button click, go to this asset actions, create material instance. I don't want to change main name and click OK. Then I'm going to assign this material instance to this cube. So click this icon to fill it in. And you can see this is what we get. Now we can adjust this material instance. So we can change the offset. We can change the tiling. And pretty much everything that we do later, UV distortion, animation, planar projection, cell bumping, they are all based on this texture coordinate node and the idea of values on both axes. I'll see you in the next lecture.